Right, for this project, I want to focus on the subject of people in groups. So I'm going to paint a picture of an interior with 5 men sitting around the table. It's actually an English pub. So let's start. Now what I will do is, I will start with just one colour, and I will just kind of, now you can use charcoal if you like to sketch this out, but I'm just going to use a brush just to kind of get a basic kind of feeling of where the objects and the subjects are. And again, I'm just quickly mapping these in to give a sense of where I think the people are located around the table. As you can see, I'm just literally making quick kind of mapping marks to get a feeling of where I think the table is and where the 5 men are. Located around the table. Now you can do this obviously with charcoal. I'm just roughly doing it with a brush. So as you can see, we've got a rough kind of idea where we think these 5 guys are sitting, and again, as I keep on explaining, painting is a journey, a stage by stage journey, and unless you follow the stages, you can't hope to kind of develop an interesting and honest picture. And of course, as I'm going around the picture, I can decide and change elements of the composition if I decide to. And again, I'm trying to create my interpretation of what I'm seeing. I'm not trying to recreate the photograph. I'm trying to use the photograph as a means of inspiration. And as I go along, if I decide I need to change the composition, and obviously I will do. Again, I've already got the photograph there, so I'm not interested in just reproducing a photograph. I'm interested in bringing a new image to life. And when I keep on mentioning the journey, what I mean is, I know what I can do. What I'm trying to do is explore areas that are new to me, new challenges, which will give me a journey that is full of surprises, and I can develop a language which is my own. There's lots of people that can draw well, but there's very few that have an original voice. If you think of Rembrandt, Picasso, Sutin, Van Gogh, Gauguin, Goya, the list is endless, Walter Sickert, it goes on, there's too many to mention. The thing they have in common is, although their language is very different, is they have a unique vision. So we just started with a rough kind of position of some guys around the table. Now, question is where it will go from here. So again, I'm mapping out with the brush the kind of trying to understand the forms that I'm looking at the same time trying to bring something new to the image, which is my creation, rather than just mimicking the photograph. And so at the same time, although the photograph is the basis for the subjects, in fact, my imagination in connection with the photograph is really creating a new image completely. And again, I'm also considering elements which I'm really changing as I go along from the original. If you look at the great Clouseau film of Picasso, you quite clearly see how each mark leads on to a new journey. And the end destination is never realised until the end. So again, don't be so quick to illustrate the photograph. Take your time, and if you do that, you will create your own painting, and the language will be your own voice, like a musician. There's lots of musicians around that are very good. They can read the music, play the music, but the ones that are exceptional are the ones that bring something magical which you cannot you cannot describe or pinpoint or even teach. You can teach people to draw better, but as regards to an original voice, that is something that separates just a good drawing or good painting to great painting. You know, for me it's searching for new experiences, and I like the paint to dictate the composition and the development of the subject. I don't want to control the paint so much where it loses its energy and loses its vitality. So let the paint take you on a journey. Don't force it, don't control it so much where you lose all the vitality. That's, if you look at the plein air artists and the beginnings of Impressionism, for example, the reason why the colours and the pictures are full of life is because they're working directly from nature, and they have to work spontaneously to kind of create their images, and that gives you the vitality that they have when you look at them, and the colours and the energy. You know, after the invention of photography, there was no need to try to mimic a photograph in paint. And that's how new languages were developed, and really that's how modernism started, through the beginnings of the Impressionists exploring plein air painting. Plein air meaning directly painting from life. And that's when you get honest marks, honest brushwork, and not illustrational daubs, which are just trying to seduce, but have no real honesty. So by building up layers of lights and darks and trying to understand the different forms, I'm gradually trying to build and understand the subject that I'm dealing with. Layer by layer, step by step. Like a sculptor chiseling pieces of stone away, he gradually reveals the subject that's been encased basically in layers of stone. The idea is often, it's been suggested that all the sculptor does is chisel away what's already there, i.e. the actual form is already in place. All the sculptor does is chisel away the excess. Of course, it's much more complicated than that, but it's a nice image. And by also keeping the brush moving in a very fluid way, again you get that surprise and you get a journey that you'd never imagined would occur. I never use black in my work. I just mix dark tones with a variety of colours that give me the shades that I'm looking for. So I'm letting the paint dictate the image rather than me strangling every mark in a very enforced way, you know. And this is like obviously again keeping the paint moving and letting the marks uncover and suggest new possibilities. So that's about it for the moment. As you see, I've just roughly sketched out the general composition. Now it's a question of layer upon layer, developing this basic structure from lights, mid-tones to dark tones, and then exploring where this journey takes me. If I knew the end result, there'd be no point in taking the journey. It's like having an open ticket to travel. You just travel, and each new destination gives you a new experience. For me, that's what painting is about. Okay, so that's the beginning. In the class, I will talk more, and each week we will develop it throughout the lessons. Well, I've mixed a series of tones up, and now I'm going to add lights, mid-tones, and dark tones, and redraw some of the figures that I previously worked on. And while it's still wet, if I work wet into wet, I can begin to adjust my previous tones and marks. But with acrylic, because you're working very quickly, you must have the tonal values mixed up already, because it will dry. And if you want to work wet into wet, obviously you need to be aware of that. Of course, sometimes you want to let your earlier layers dry before you work on them again. This is the sensibility of the artist that decides that. If you don't have your tones mixed up ready, then you can't actually deal with a mid-tone to a dark tone and a light tone at the same time. By keeping it wet into wet, I can adjust my marks. And again, layer upon layer, I can adjust different tonal marks that I made previously. And again, like I said previously, I'm keeping the paint moving and instructing me what to do next. I'm not trying to illustrate. I'm trying to keep the marks clean and honest to the subject that I'm dealing with. Always refer to the subject you're dealing with. Always keep dealing with and observing the subject. That will inform your mark making. If you don't do that, it's easy to lose your way, and it's easy to create marks that are really illustrational rather than painterly. What I mean by that is marks that have a honesty and a freshness rather than marks that are manipulated and strangled into some reality. So I'll carry on like this, going through the picture, looking at the lights and darks. For example, over here it gets very dark, for example. I'm keeping the paint moving all the time. I'm trying to keep my marks moving in a fresh, spontaneous way. So creating movement and spontaneity. And as I said before, I'm letting marks dictate my next move. And again, after I've worked on this layer, I will return to it and check whether I'm happy with the elements I've dealt with. And if I'm not happy, well, I keep on working until I am, until it makes sense to me. Well, as you can see, I've started to look at the different tonal values and the light coming from the window on the left. I'm just gradually building up layer upon layer an understanding of the figures and how the light affects the figures, going from the light mid-tones to the dark tones. As I said before, I personally like the paint to be very fresh and spontaneous. So I don't like to overwork so it becomes mannered and illustrational. So it remains to be seen how this painting develops in the subsequent days. Anyway, that's my journey so far. Now you've got to start your beginning. And remember, layer upon layer, fat over thin. That is the way to build up a picture and keep redrawing, repainting your previous misconceptions.